Trick or treat, motherfuckers. I'm back. I am so sorry I didn't do videos last week, but I truthfully, after the whole disappointment with Bound for Glory and Raw the next day was so bad that I was like, you know what, I need to take a small mini break from the world of wrestling. And I entertained myself in other ways. You know, I got hooked into the World Series, which was very good. Congratulations to the St. Louis Cardinals. That was a very good series of games. I like that. Great end of the season. And, you know, it's Halloween season, so I gotta, you know, get into horror movie mode, and I'm just watching all my favorite horror movies. I also went to go see Paranormal Activity 3, which I was not a big fan of the first two. I liked the premise, but I didn't think it was executed all that well in both movies, except for a few bit parts here and there. But I thought the third one was very good, so if I can recommend a Halloween movie to watch this weekend, go see Paranormal Activity 3. I thought it was very good. Really liked it. But yeah, it's time to get back into the world of wrestling, and what to talk about. Well, we got the Muppets on Monday. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to. Again, I don't think the show is going to be that great of a wrestling show, but as long as it's a good Muppet show, I'll be okay with it. The Rock is set to come back for Survivor Series, which that's kind of cool. Even though, it kind of goes back into that whole thing. It's kind of sad that the most exciting thing about your product are sock puppets and a guy who had his big run 10 years ago. But, you know, Rock's just awesome, and he's going to generate any kind of spark whenever he's involved. So, good for him. Survivor Series might be worth checking out just to see The Rock. And with TNA, good lord, a lot of shit happened at the spoilers. They've taped, I think an entire month of television, I think. And, everything has changed. It feels like 6 months of TV was crammed into, 2 or 3 shows. It's pretty crazy. But to build off what I said in the last video with my disappointment over Bound for Glory, I stand by what I said. I think Robert Roode should have won the title at Bound for Glory. I think not doing that was a horrible ending to the show and just a massive disappointment. And now I have to go into how they followed up on it. James Storm won the title last week, which shocked me. I thought if anybody was going to come out of nowhere and beat Angle for the title, I thought it was going to be Jeff Hardy, which I would not have liked. I don't think Hardy's kind of like in that... what do I want to compare him to? If I was going to go into the world of movie making, he'd be like Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. had to, do shit projects, B-level stuff. I think he was, in bit parts in a couple of Disney movies before he had to start getting, the Iron Man roles again because, he had a history of fucking up, and now he's got to prove himself. And I think that's the spot that Hardy needs to be. It's all right, if you're serious about changing and you're never going to do that again, you have to be in bit parts if we're ever going to trust you with a main event. That's the mindset I would take. I would never put him in a main event again, but that's just me. I probably never would have brought him back in the first place. But again, that's just me. But yeah, going into the James Storm thing, I thought the moment itself looked cool. I watched it on YouTube. That came off well. The problem is, I feel like it feels like a Jack Swagger, Sheamus type of situation where, it has nothing to do with the talent of the guy. It's just, this guy that you didn't really push all that well, all of a sudden is coming out of nowhere and winning the world title. And great, James Storm, they kind of had him in the mix. I mean, he had a match with Angle that ended in a no contest. He had a match with Roode where there wasn't a clean finish. So, he was in the mix, but he hadn't really gotten to that Robert Roode level where I was fully ready for him to win the title. And I feel like they did that just for shock value. And I think they planned this just based on the fact that Storm had that match with Roode a couple weeks ago that didn't end clean and everything. I think they were obviously setting up for this. And, I looked at the situation. It's like, okay, I know what you're doing. You're going to mimic what Ring of Honor did with the American Wolves, where they had Eddie Edwards win the title out of nowhere when everybody thought it was going to be Davey. And I got to be honest, I didn't like it when they did it because I was not, as someone who does not follow Ring of Honor regularly, and I'm sorry I don't, and I don't get their show. Their show's not on in my area, which is a shame. But when they did that, my first response was, who the fuck is Eddie Edwards? Because, I don't follow the show regularly, and he was not one of the big names. I knew of the American Wolves tag team, And I obviously knew who Davey Richards was because of all the hype surrounding him. But I was like, off the top of my head, I didn't know who Eddie Edwards was. It just kind of felt like an out of nowhere type of situation. And, I know they had a match on pay-per-view that was amazing. I didn't see the pay-per-view, but, critic reports were that the match was amazing. And I'm sure Robert Roode and James Storm can go out there and have phenomenal matches. I think that could be one of the better main event programs TNA's done in a while. But just the way they've done it and the way they executed it and everything, it's like, we're kind of back in that territory where Roode and Storm are going to have to make the most out of the situation rather than, having the writing and the creative support them. But to follow up on that, then at the Macon, Georgia TV tapings, they had Robert Roode win the title and turn heel. And then they did a rematch the next show, I guess, where he injures Storm. And then AJ gets the title shot against Robert Roode. And that'll be your next pay-per-view main event. And I'm like, holy crap, they did all that in 2 shows? God, they're rushing everything. And, it just goes back to the same old problem of, they pull the trigger way too soon. They rush things. They don't let things grow and develop properly. And it just feels rushed. And yeah, Robert Roode's champion now, but it would have been a lot cooler if you'd done it at Bound for Glory, or if you'd done something at Bound for Glory to end it on more of a fun way, rather than just going with the ending they did. Because I don't know, it feels like they just set Robert Roode back so far that doing this whole heel turn thing on top of it just feels like they're scrambling to come up with a plan rather than actually, having a plan. So I'm not really a fan of the execution. I like the ideas, but I'm not a fan of the execution. And it's a shame that one of the best things TNA had going, the thing I complimented them on the most this year was the push of Robert Roode, and now they've kind of thrown that to the wayside. And now that's going to lead me into what I'm going to say about the WWE. It is so sad to me that, where they were during the summer with the whole Money in the Bank thing, the whole CM Punk promo and all that jazz, where they are now is just sad to me, that they didn't fully maximize the potential of what they could have done with CM Punk following Money in the Bank and following the whole situation that they had set up with him. And I don't think it was a deliberate intent to bury Punk like some people do. I don't think that was the intent. I think the intent was, hey, if we bring him back after a week, because that's where it started. That was mistake number 1, and it's just been downhill ever since. But they thought, oh God, that's going to make him a megastar. It's like, oh yeah, we got to keep him on TV because Punk's the fucking man. And I think that was the thought process. Unfortunately, when shitty creative gets in the way, it tends to ruin a good situation. And right now, CM Punk is just another babyface. He's interchangeable. You can just throw him into the main event. It's, it is what it is. I mean, I'd rather have him than Cena or Del Rio, to be perfectly honest, but he's not hot for the reason that he was hot. He just feels like an interchangeable babyface. And it feels like whenever I would tune into Raw, he's always tagging with Cena. I've seen that quite a bit. And then at the pay-per-view, they had him tag with Triple H, which I really don't like, because it's you had this CM Punk character. I did not want him to become buddy-buddy with Cena or Triple H, but now it's like, they're the 3 best friends that anybody could have. They're the 3 best friends that anybody could have. They're the 3 best friends that anybody could have, and they'll never, ever, 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 ever leave each other. And that's just kind of what we have now. And speaking of Triple H, I really hate how this whole main event angle, which started with Punk, has now become a power struggle over who's in control of Monday Night Raw. And I'll say this right now, and I'll throw this, the whole Hogan Sting thing that TNA did, all the angles they've done over the years, like McMahon power struggles, and Vicky Guerrero, and Teddy Long fighting over control of SmackDown, and all that shit, and all the different power struggles that have been going on over the years recently. I really don't give a shit who's in charge of the goddamn show. And, is anybody else going to stand up and admit that? It's like, does it really matter whether or not Triple H is in charge of Monday Night Raw? I mean, is the show really that different if that character is not in the authority role? Because I didn't think so. I thought the show was almost identical to what it was when McMahon was in charge, and now that John Laurinaitis is in charge, it's almost the same as it was before. So nothing changes, except, if a heel's in charge, he'll favor the heels, and if a babyface is in charge, he'll favor the babyfaces. But, can't we go back to the Jack Tunney days of where you had a guy who looked like an authority figure? I mean, that guy looked like he could have been an executive or, like a Roger Goodell type of guy for the NFL, somebody that could have been in charge of a legit sport. I mean, nobody questioned the guy's authority, and he didn't have any. He was just a character for TV. I mean, there was no he had no real power within the company, but he looked the part, and he only showed up when there needed to be a controversy that was settled, when you needed to make an important decision. Other than that, we didn't really see him that much, and I think that's the way it should be. The Austin McMahon thing is over. And it's like the NWO. They keep trying to relive that. Those were the two big angles of the Monday Night Wars period, the NWO and Austin McMahon. And both companies constantly go back to those things. We're going to get either an NWO ripoff, or we're going to get some kind of power struggle for whoever's running the company, or we're going to get the evil boss situation. And PS Power talked about this in his video. I talked about it in my cliche videos a few months ago. I just don't give a fuck who's in charge of the show. It doesn't matter. Can we go back to just building up fights between the wrestlers? And yeah, that's another thing. We got feuds between announcers. Still, Michael Cole is still feuding with like Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross. It's been almost a year. Why? Who cares? Does anybody honestly care? I mean, the shit was one of the major reasons WrestleMania was iffy at best. I mean, why do we got to keep this shit going? And then they wonder why they can't create new stars. Because they focus all their time and attention on referees. TNA's doing it with Garrett Bischoff. Is he a wrestler? I don't even know. I don't care, to be perfectly honest. We got storylines with referees. We got storylines with announcers. And we got storylines with, authority figures. And the wrestlers are kind of, they kind of feel like the secondary characters a lot of the time. And then they wonder why they can't create new stars. I mean, that's... there you go. That's part of the problem, among other things. And how they've really shifted their focus from CM Punk onto this stupid... basically, we're back to the McMahon family squabble. We're back to that now. Because that got old, didn't it? And I just don't care. Really. And I wish I could get that message across to TNA and WWE. Look, I don't care who's in charge of your goddamn show. And I don't care about non-wrestling characters being put into storylines. And I gotta say this, the process of matchmaking is not compelling television. I've talked about this before, but I don't like the need that they feel the need to have promos to set up matches for later in the show, and they make up the matches as they go. Or they'll do a long, drawn-out process of just setting up a pay-per-view match, where they just announce a match for a pay-per-view. Does anybody remember when it was back in the 90s, or before the Attitude Era, where they would basically just have Mean Gene sitting in a sound studio or something? He's like, this just announced for this pay-per-view, so-and-so's wrestling so-and-so. And that was it. Instead, we get these long segments, these long, drawn-out segments, just to announce that a match is going to happen at the pay-per-view. And I gotta say that the process of matchmaking is not compelling television. I have to say, it's really not. There's got to be a better way to tell your stories, I would think. Because it's just the same formulaic BS over and over and over and over again. It just gets old. Wrestling's in dire need of a format change. I think that's the major thing that needs to change. Just a total format, creative change. It needs to look different from what it did 10 to 15 years ago. And it's not just the wrestlers, even though that's a problem. I don't need any 50, 60-year-olds in main event spots. But just the structuring of the show, the look of the show, the execution of the shows, it's exactly the same as it was 15 years ago, only not as fresh and not as good. And that needs to change if they want to, take wrestling in a new direction. That said, I don't think... Raw's been kind of iffy lately, and I do like the idea of a Storm and Rude main event program. I think that could be cool. Again, it's all a matter of the execution, so I'm not going to say that both shows are the worst they've ever been, or they're both terrible. It's just, it's in dire need of change on both companies, again, and that's not, I don't see that coming, even with, new creative minds interjected into the process, but we'll see how it all goes. I do plan on doing something for Survivor Series, because obviously with The Rock being in there, that does make me interested enough to want to check it out. So we'll see how that goes. I look forward to having The Rock back on TV. I think he's going to really bring some life back to the WWE, because he always does. He did this year. And it didn't change any problems with the writing or the formatting or anything like that necessarily. But just having him there just added a huge spark to the show. And I look forward to having that back, if nothing else. So that's all I got for now. Enjoy the Muppets, I guess, on Monday Night Raw. And I hope everybody has a good and safe Halloween. Go out, get drunk, watch your favorite horror movies. It's a fun time of the year, so enjoy yourselves. And peace out. I'll see you all next week.